It all begins with this guy Alex, and
How does it
so
all begin? Take me from
well,
the beginning.
it's just this is secondhand. You have to understand, because I didn't get there until, you know, after the program had started. Alex, I believe, was class of '72, and I think he started the program. At what point he did and how he did, I don't know. I assume he went over to the associate AD and said, "Hey, give us a couple $100 to play men's volleyball." It's my understanding that men's volleyball started, around 1972. Okay. Well, men's volleyball nationally, the first national championship was 1970. So us coming in '72 sounds right, but it could have even been earlier than that. They could have been playing as underclassmen, and Alex could have been in the class of '72. I'm not really sure. The Daves, Dave Agnew, Dave Lax, Ace, Rice Schneider, Toby would have been the setter on that team. So that was, the next generation after Alex had started it, and I'm sure when they were younger they had played, 75. So 72 they would have been freshmen. So that team, and that was the guys that we would play against when I was playing for the USVBA team that played out of Princeton. But Susanna was the one who coached that team in '75.
When do women start?
And then women, I think, would have started right around when Susanna got there, but she had to get a team together
She
first.
started the men first in '75, or she?
No, Alex started the men's team. She came along, the men's team was already in place. So they said, well, here, it's funny, Susanna was hired to be director of phys ed. Now back then, you had physical education classes, and Susanna was hired as an administrator to be the director of phys ed. But her background was in volleyball, so the smart people over at Javelin Gym at the time said, hey, maybe we should have a volleyball team. So Susanna had something to do besides being director of phys ed. So they did that. So I had the men's team in '79. '78, we had a JV team I coached, and Toby was still coaching the varsity team. So then Susanna asked me to help her out with the women, so I did, and then when she left, I took over both programs. Like when I was finishing up at what is now the College of New Jersey, I was coaching there. So Susanna saw me coaching and was shocked, didn't know that I was, a potential coach. Neither did I at the time. But so she asked me to come up and help out with the men. That's when she knew that Toby was going to be done, in '78. She coached the men, I'm going to say, 74, 75. So now you have a little background on the history that led up to me showing up. JV coach of men
JV coach of men
in '78.
'78.
Next year, take over the varsity in '79.
Susanna's still doing the women.
Susanna's still doing the women and asking me at that time to then help her out with the women. She leaves in '82. She actually left in '81. She went on sabbatical, she came back for 6 months and then left for good.
And you come on as both.
And I come on as both. All right, one of the things I'm kind of proud of is that it was almost like there was, I don't want to say there was a divisive element in place, but there was a little bad feeling between the men's and the women's team. And I like to think that when I took over both, that all that changed. And I hope it stayed that way. And I think it has. I think it's one thing people notice. People that know stuff about volleyball and will occasionally, have a glimpse into the program, see that the men's and women's team get along very well, which is not the case at other places.
And what gave you the insight to do that?
It seemed to be the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Men, in the early days, some of the men would come to practice and help out, with the women's team and add an element of that the second squad couldn't give you. I think in certain years that helped us be really good. And I think the girls appreciated that. And so for a long time I didn't have an assistant, and my assistant with the women's was one of the guys from the men's team who just either wanted to play a little more volleyball or hang around the girls, so.
What's the talk about the 80s?
Okay, so I inherited a pretty good team in both teams.
Yeah.
So let's get that straight. It was the guys that, the Rice Schneiders and the Millers and the Agnes and the Laxes and, Toby Nelson and Jimmy Nelson, his brother, those guys were good players. We were ahead of the curve, I think, and the recruiting And then we got some West Coast kids that were good players. So, and that was before the rest of the country caught up. But you know, we won a third of the time with the women that I was, or a little more than a third of the time. So in an 8-team league, you win a third of the time. You're doing pretty good. You know, coaching is getting people to do things as correctly as possible. That's what coaching is. The great thing about coaching at Princeton is that the kids that show up at Princeton have been doing things as correctly as possible all their lives. That's why they're at Princeton. So you just give them, you know, a couple of hard and fast rules on the court, and you let them play the game. And that's basically what I did for 30 years. The one thing that we did have was accountability. And I think that's really important. Towards the end, it got to be, come on, you're better than that. You know what you're supposed to do. And then when you get somebody like Joe McCarthy around, you know, Joe McCarthy holds everybody accountable, and basically sets the tone of the way things are going to be, and the rest of the team buys into that, and then you just sit back and say he's right, you know. So, and I think that's, I don't know that I question whether that goes on today. Like, just for example, I was sitting at your last game I was at against Harvard, and somebody passed a free ball on the 10-foot line, and Koopy was with me, and I looked at her and said, you know, if that happened on my watch, I would be up and screaming at that person that just passed the free ball on the 10-foot line. And so would, you know, not necessarily wouldn't have been screaming, but 5 other guys would have said, we got to do better than that. You know, we got to have 4 options on that pass and not 1 out here. So that's the kind of thing that I was a hard ass about, and if that offended some people, well then so be it. But that's, you know, this is how we're going to play the game. That's totally unacceptable that you passed that ball on the 10-foot line. And it's totally unacceptable if a guy made a great dig, you know, got a ball up, another guy ran it down and got it up, and somehow it got to you on the 8-foot line, and you buried it in the net or hit it off the back wall. That's unacceptable, and you have to understand that. There's certain places that you needed to place that ball, and if you couldn't do it, then you weren't going to play. And this is what I believe. I believe that in every match that you play, at some point you're going to have the momentum. Even if you know, you're playing the New Jersey School for the Blind, you miss a serve, now the New Jersey School for the Blind has the momentum, okay? And the team that does the least to destroy their own momentum will win. And there are various things that I believe that were momentum killers. And as I described the play before, where, you know, a couple of people make great plays and then the third ball gets to you and it's not ideal and you do the wrong thing with it. That's the biggest momentum killer. Missing serves is a giant momentum killer. That every one of the whatever the 5 rules that I had all had to do with keeping the pressure on. Once you got the momentum, it was keeping the pressure on the other team, and eventually they would crack. First they were the Black Shorts gang. You know, I just seem to recall being somewhere, going to play a match with the men's team. You know, this is back in the days when we were in the van, and we're all walking down the street, and it was you know, like an hour and a half before the match, and we had just grabbed something to eat, and we were walking down the street, and it was a springtime like this, I guess late in the season, and you know, everyone had their shorts, you know, their uniform shorts on, you know, and they're like, somebody said something, oh, we the Black Shorts gang, you know, so, and then somebody else said, no, we're not, we're the Van of Dudes. So it became, you know, the Van O Dudes, and thus the legend was founded. That bus added years to my career. Yeah. Sabrina King and that bus were the reason I stayed as long as I did. So, yeah, that was, you know, I had my cane, I had my sweet wooden cane that I had for a long time, and it was a home match. I don't even remember who it was against, but the other team overpassed the ball right to our left front, who was Peter Eichler, and Eichler went up and hit it into the net, and I was, you know, had the buffer zone there, so my cane was there, and I just took my cane, I go, damn, Eichler, and I hit the cane down on the chair, and the cane snapped in half. And naturally, the bench just went absolutely berserk, and they later got the cane and taped it together, and one of them has it somewhere. I don't know. There was a young man that played for us who got in a little bit of trouble, and he put himself in the system. the legal system. So he had to make an appearance at the court in Princeton. On his way to the court, he encountered a woman in a wheelchair. The woman couldn't get up over the curb. He picked up the woman's wheelchair, got her up over the curb. Long story short, he gets in the courtroom. That woman is the judge. And the woman looks at him and says, "Oh, you're the nice young man that helped me." Now, people that were, prosecuting him, were a little deflated by that. And to make a long story short, he made a mistake, and the repercussions were very minimal. But and the fabulous GNC, the Glenn Nelson Classic, held every fall. It's become the premier fall event in men's volleyball nationwide. No, I'm going to go nationwide. I'm one of these years UCLA is going to show up to play, and they named a tournament. You got something named after you up there? And I said, yeah, I do. So it was. It is a nice little perk. And all the stuff that we used to do, like throw darts, that keeps you competitive. The one thing that we always did was compete. Even when we weren't on the volleyball court, somebody was saying, "Hey, I can beat you at darts, or I can beat you at quates, or I can beat you at pool or something." So we fostered a competitive atmosphere, and I like to think it's still that way. The name game predates me, so you'd have to check in with Toby as to who brought the name game to the van. I became the king of the name game. Yeah. That's the Liljestroms. Oh yeah, that's all the Liljestroms. We never played Liar's Dice before. Brent Liljerstrom walked in, unzipped his little case, and said, "We're going to play some Liar's Dice. Get the cups." Yeah. So that's a Liljerstrom invention.
What do reunions mean to you?
Yeah, it's great to see everybody every 5 years. That's something Princeton does better than any other. There's a lot of things that Princeton does better than any other college in America, but that's probably the foremost one. Bringing that many people back every year. So it's it's a special time. Like 3 weeks before was the match where Carl jump served 7 in a row, and Mike Vincent blocked and killed a couple of balls, and we were down 14 to 9, I think it was, and we won 16-14. And the fact that Carl actually hit 7 jump serves in a row is like kind of beyond belief. The fact that during that stretch we blocked every ball, or they hit it out, or we dug it is amazing. But what was really good this season was that, and I kind of love you for this, that we beat Harvard twice, and we beat George Mason twice. And those, Harvard for obvious reasons, and George Mason because of they were our bitter EIVA rival. Yeah, I can tell you where Cuz came from. We used to have a break week in March, and you still do, and you use it to play, and I would use it for a break. And the reason was because I had been coaching the women so we would get away for a few days. And I would go to Florida, and I wouldn't go to California. My father lived in Bradenton. So I would go down to Florida, and I would take my beach volleyball and my golf clubs, and I went to the local beach, and because of my skill level or because of my personality or whatever, I was able to walk on and befriend these guys, all the local beach bums at this one particular beach. And there were 2 guys there, both with the surname West. Neil West was one of them, and Randy West was the other one. And they called one another Cuz, even though they weren't related. So when I went down there, they started calling me Cuz. So then everybody on the beach was, "Yo, Cuz, you're up next. Yo, Cuz, we're burning daylight. Let's go. Start the game." So after having done that, I came back to Princeton and started with the "Yo, Cuz," because it stuck in my head. So it came from Holmes Beach on the Gulf Coast of Florida.
And you became Cuz.
And then somehow I became Cuz. You know, I don't know how that happened, but it did.